I'd normally never talk in depth about a character that is yet to release, but Mydei is in a unique position because pretty much his full kit was shown to us at the start of 3.1's Trailblaze quest weeks before his banner, and it shows off more than enough for people to conclude that his gameplay is really weird. Now, given that we're so close to his release, it's very unlikely that Hoyoverse would care to change anything, but since everyone was given the chance to test him out before his release, we have a rare opportunity to give feedback before he's made fully playable, after which he definitely won't be changed. There's genuinely only one thing that people don't like, but it's a pretty intrusive one thing, is that his enhanced state causes him to go into a forced auto mode where you can't choose the enemy he targets. Well, I guess there's also the fact that he is yet another imaginary type character, but I can get past that. Going auto mode is going to be annoying because he's a character with only blast targeting, which would normally give you the option of either focusing down one enemy first or distributing your damage evenly. Apocalyptic Shadow is a perfect example of where this matters, since most times there's little to no point in touching the boss until they're made vulnerable from taking down one of the side enemies. But suddenly with this new mechanic, you are relinquished of any of that control, making it a drawback that no other character suffers from. The concept of a character targeting on their own is a fine idea in a vacuum, but the problem is that here's attached to a character that isn't fitting for it at all. I mean, we already have follow-up attacks, which all have their own forms of targeting which can't be directly aimed by the player, as well as the recent addition of memo sprites that also act independently, so this Mydei mechanic isn't even that novel to begin with. But at least for those other ones, they act in addition to the character's normal targeting instead of replacing it. Supports in Star Rail tend to have the most one-dimensional gameplay, with you just maintaining their buffs as they expire, and healers healing as needed. So damage units lend themselves to requiring the most active thought when using them, yet Mydei does the complete opposite. So now using teams centered around him might as well be on the game's actual auto mode. I should acknowledge that Mydei can influence his targeting a little bit with his ultimate, but why is that even necessary in the first place? He doesn't seem to gain anything from not being controllable. Yes, he gets significant buffs during that period, but he'd functionally be the same if we did have control of him at all times. We can't explicitly see his ascension traces yet, but since he's max level in the trial, we can generally assume that he has one that grants him major stat buffs, very likely scaling off one of his own stats like most other characters have, another that helps extend the duration of his enhanced state, and one that makes it so his ultimate guides his next charged attack. If he has no apparent benefits from random targeting based on everything we already know, it really feels like it shouldn't be there to begin with. Some other characters have proven to have additions to their kit that aren't very outwardly beneficial, and while they have some implications on gameplay, they more so seem like they were included for thematic reasons. Examples that come to mind are Firefly's self-HP consumption and Jingliu's HP consumption to teammates. These examples are very different from Mydei's case though, because they can provide clear contributions with specific partners, and also you can completely negate the downsides of them by running any of the many healers in the game. Mydei's auto-targeting doesn't synergize with any existing character, and to be honest, it would be kind of weird if it did work with a future character, but it's also important that you can't counteract it with anything. If there was a self-inflicted rage debuff applied instead, at least you'd be able to cleanse it pretty easily, while still maintaining that thematic element to an extent, but that's not what they went for. Regardless of whether or not this mechanic is fitting for his character writing, which I'm having a little trouble understanding myself to be honest, it's just a bad contribution to his kit no matter how you look at it. It's not even like there was a precedent for units having this, so nobody would have complained that controlling him during his rage state would be out of character. If players want to run him on auto mode, that button is always present anyway, so removing the option of manual control just seems pointless. It especially feels backwards since Fei Xiao released not that long ago and is the complete opposite example in that her ultimate gives the player a false sense of control. As a quick reminder, once activated it lets you do two types of damage, an axe slash that does increased damage on enemies that aren't weakness broken, and a sword slash that does the same for when they are broken. 6 of these plus the finisher gets you the listed total of 700% damage because the game assumes you'll always use the correct option. I mean, there's literally no reason at all not to. And if you don't want to have to put any thought into it, you can just spam click on the enemy or press spacebar to have the game do it for you. So while ultimately there wasn't any good gameplay reason to implement this sequence to begin with, it's visually very cool, gives the player a false sense of interaction, and shouldn't negatively affect your gameplay. In contrast, Mydei's auto-targeting can certainly negatively affect gameplay, removes the player's sense of interaction, and doesn't feel satisfying at all to use. If Hoyoverse did implement this as an intentional nerf because they considered Mydei to be too strong of a character, it still wouldn't feel like the right direction to go because it's so rigid in design. Low numbers can always be brought up later down the line with tailored partner units or equipment, but this targeting mechanic is untouchable without an incredibly shoehorned solution. Regardless of how impactful it ends up being on his damage output, it's just not a fun or interesting mechanic with no real reasons to exist in the first place. They literally did not even mention his targeting at all during the 3.1 reveal stream, which even further sells me on the point that it's not an integral part of his kit design. It stings even harder that the rest of his kit, from what I can tell, has excellent design. Clearly, he's a modern take on the HP scaling DPS, and there's so much incorporated to ensure that it actually works. Mydei's talent accumulates charge when he loses HP, so unlike Blade, who wants his HP to be lowered by any amount very frequently to get 5 stacks and launch a follow-up, Mydei wants his high HP stat to drop as much as possible. To help with this, his skill never costs skill points, only consuming a percentage of his max HP. Rest in peace, Arlon. This uniquely gives his supports more skill points to work with, and that's especially nice when he will need more healing than your average DPS. His ultimate taunts all enemies hit to ensure he takes the most hits, and when his enhanced state is activated, his max HP increases while his defense goes down to 0. This is genius because it removes any form of damage mitigation, further boosting the amount of HP lost from taking hits. This is all while he isn't actually in danger of dying completely, since if he does get knocked out, even through his lifeline passive, he simply exits his enhanced state. To also offset the unusually high amount of HP healers will need to be maintaining, Mydei's scaling gives him an extra % incoming healing boost. Mydei clearly has a very cohesive kit that takes into account all of the oddities of scaling with lost HP, as well as any future HP scaling supports we might get later. So it really sucks that some understandably aren't fans of his auto-targeting, despite everything else being well executed. Usually when random things are thrown into a character's kit, it's good because it means another character can take advantage of it. But this has to be the one thing that feels like it can't possibly have any upsides in terms of synergy and gameplay feel. I've already submitted a player feedback form just because there's no harm in doing so, but considering we've already gotten to this point after Mydei has already gone through beta testing, I'm not exactly confident that something will change. And there is the possibility that when he's released I'll change my perspective, but we'll just have to wait and see. I hope you found this video to be interesting or insightful. Subscribe for more Honkai Star Rail discussion videos, and as always, thanks for watching.